field that is being used as a replacement for animal therapy in nursing homes, which is really kind of awesome.
So she built planets on Earth, you guys.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Museum of Science, Boston. I'm James Monroe. I'm the producer of adult programs and theater experiences here at the museum, and I am so excited to welcome you all to our very special evening with Encode Justice. I'm also thrilled to have a live in-person audience here with us. Yes, give yourselves a hand. We are still a limited capacity, but we are mighty and enthusiastic, and we are just so happy to have you here. We ask you to please leave those masks on at all times while in the building, but thank you for joining us. We also ask if you need to leave the program early for any reason that you do so by going up the steps and through the exit in the rear of the theater if possible, and that you take this moment to silence all electronic devices, including those cell phones. I also want to note that we are live streaming tonight's talk as well to a virtual audience who are watching on YouTube right now. So a huge hello to our digital friends. Thank you for tuning in wherever you are tonight. It's a pleasure to have you as well. I'm also thrilled tonight to welcome to the stage the leadership from an incredible group called Encode Justice. They are a youth coalition who have mobilized chapters all over the world that are fighting for and advocating for equitable AI. And I first found out about their work this past fall from an incredible CNN article, and I was thrilled when they accepted my invitation to come here tonight to Boston and share with all of you everything they are doing to shape the future of AI. And they are joined in conversation by our moderator for the evening, Professor Seana 𝗘𝗃. And Professor 𝗘𝗃 is the Associate Director for the Anti-Racist Tech Initiative at Boston University's Center for Anti-Racist Research. She is also an Assistant Professor at BU's 𝗘his𝗰 School of Business, and her research investigates race and gender inequalities in STEM organizations using field, experimental, and computational research methods. And it's an honor to have Seana here with us tonight. She's becoming a great friend to the museum and a perfect choice to lead this conversation. This is just the start of our current Subspace season, so I encourage you to check out our full lineup. We have something every week now through May, so you can pick up our season mailer on your way out, or you can go to our website at mos.org/adults and spend your entire winter spring with us here at the museum. I also encourage you to check out our virtual program for tonight. You can learn more about Encode Justice and all the work happening here at the Museum of Science. All you have to do if you're in person is scan the QR code on the signage on your way out. And if you're watching with us online, you can scan the QR code that will be on your broadcast a little bit later. Also, a little bit later on, all of you will get a chance to ask questions to our panel. So if you have a question for Encode Justice, you can pull out those smartphones, and you can go to slido.com and enter the code Encode Justice, all one word, just as it appears on the screen behind me. And we'll get to a couple of those a little bit later on. I need to thank our friends from the Lowell Institute for making tonight possible and for all of their continued support for the adult programming here at the museum. Without them, we would not be here tonight, so a huge thank you to everyone at the Lowell Institute. But now it's my honor to welcome to the stage our moderator for the evening, Professor 𝗘𝗃 and Encode Justice. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see people in person for a change. I am really honored to be here with Encode Justice, a grassroots organization that is aiming to center youth voices in the fight for algorithmic justice. Let's check out this incredible video to learn more about their organization.
Hi, my name is 𝗘𝗃 and I'm from Pennsylvania.
Hi, I'm Suri from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania.
Hello, I'm Pranav Palaniappan from the Missouri chapter.
Hi, I'm Chloe from the South Korea chapter.
Hi, I'm Sasha from the New Jersey, New York chapter.
Hi, my name is Sarah and I'm from Dallas, Texas.
I'm Ali Rustigar from the California chapter.
Hi, my name is Fardoza Farah and I'm from Owatonna, Minnesota.
Hi, I'm Harry Sanders from Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Hey, I'm Alana from Las Vegas, Nevada.
Hi, I'm Martha Mwangi. I'm from the Georgia chapter. Hi, my name's Sarah Parker, and I'm the chapter director for Encode Justice Canada. In the past 6 months since our official launch, we've hosted a half dozen workshops for Canadian university students across the country about socially minded AI and produced 3 full-length reports about key AI topics we think young Canadians should know about.
Hello, my name is Valeria Cartagena and I am the Bolivia chapter leader of Encode Justice. We are just getting started in my country, but our goal is already clear: to establish a solid foundation of artificial intelligence in Bolivia and create a change in social justice focused on AI policy. Our next big step is to build a multifaceted team of students and provide them with tools to do research, organize workshops, and develop an international network with experts in these areas.
Hi, my name is 𝗘Ｈİ, and I'm the chapter lead for Nevada Encode Justice. Our chapter is currently working on advocating for the regulation of AI and facial recognition technology usage by casinos. The problem is that casinos are utilizing this technology to target problem gamblers.
Hi, I'm Austin Weich, the Alabama lead here at Encode Justice. We have lobbied our senators to ban facial recognition technology, and we are currently formulating plans to counteract voter misinformation on social media platforms that target rural and minority voters, as well as increase transparency in our government.
So we also have 6 incredible members of the leadership team here with us tonight. Could you each introduce yourselves and the work that you're leading, and maybe also where you're from?
Of course. My name is 𝗘άρχ𝗰𝗲, and I serve as the founder and president of Encode Justice. I'm from San Jose, California.
I'm Alexandra Rafling. I am the editor-in-chief and the chief of staff of Encode Justice, and I'm from Los Angeles, California.
Hi, I'm Damilola Awofisayo, and I am the Director of External Affairs at Encode Justice, and I'm from Woodbridge, Virginia.
Hi, my name is Vidya Bhardwaj, and I'm from Buffalo Grove, Illinois, and I serve as the Director of Education at Encode Justice.
Hi, my name is Raksha Govind. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and I serve as the U.S. Network Lead and the Georgia Chapter Lead.
Hi, my name is Sumanth Ratna. I'm Co-Director of Technical Research, and I'm from Centerville, Virginia.
Thank you. I'm going to start with Sneha. Technology has long been seen as a solution to problems, especially in Silicon Valley and San Jose, where you're from. What led you to shift your thinking and to begin to see technology as a key part of the problem?
I was born to 2 software engineers in the epicenter of the tech world.
Are they here?
Yes, they're right there in the audience. Growing up, I would drive past the Stanford campus, and I would see Atherton, which contains the nation's priciest and most luxurious zip code, and right next to it, I would see gentrified East Palo Alto, which contains the nation's former homicide capital. I grew up in the backyard of innovation, but I also grew up in the backyard of jarring inequality, and in my view, this left me the perfect vantage point because all around me, I saw the immense potential of technology to improve our quality of life and outpace traditional ways and means, but I also saw that some communities had been entirely passed by. I saw Silicon Valley's legacy of exclusion. And over time, I began to think critically about our use of technology and to ask myself, who is innovation really helping and who is it hurting? So in 2018, I came across an expose that uncovered staggering rates of racial bias in an algorithm used to assess defendants and predict future criminality. And that brought a mental sledgehammer to the myth of algorithmic neutrality, because I realized that my generation could no longer view technology as perfectly objective, scientific, and neutral, when oftentimes algorithms just reinforce the bias already embedded in human society.
Can you talk a bit about the outcome of the work you did on Prop 25?
Yeah, so in 2020, I came across a ballot measure in my home state of California that sought to expand the use of very similar algorithms in our state's legal system. And, recognizing that, racial bias would only be reinforced, I took action. And with my team of peers, we began to organize by hosting events and webinars, calling and texting voters, creating informational content like videos and op-eds. And even though the odds were evidently stacked against us, we were actually successful. And we were able to defeat the measure by a 12.8% margin, which is obviously a pretty decisive victory. And at that point, I realized that, we had proven that people power, that grassroots energy aching for justice could be an unstoppable force. And it was pretty amazing to see the culmination of all of our efforts like that, and to be able to, actually succeed in the face of enormous odds.
It's an incredible story. I would love to ask all of you about, in your view, what some of the biggest problems are with AI as you see them and are experiencing them in your everyday lives.
So I grew up in Los Angeles, California, and my father was a criminal defense attorney. And so growing up, I was very exposed to the racial issues within the criminal justice system. And so when I learned about Proposition 25 and Encode Justice's work, I realized that this was a major problem that would really exacerbate a lot of these existing inequalities. And so I knew that I needed to join and help combat these racial issues. And then also another major issue with artificial intelligence is this really pervasive surveillance that we're starting to see manifest across our society, and it's really not reconcilable with our rights as humans and as Americans.
For me, my experience came from the school that I attend. So I attend a STEM school that has very technical computer science courses and very high-level courses, including artificial intelligence and some more specifics such as computer vision and machine learning. And throughout my time taking these courses, I realized that there was a culture that was not only seen in my classrooms, but in the computer science field as a whole. And that culture was a focus on efficiency. So making code with as little resources as possible, making code that took as little time as possible, instead of that focus on ethics or realizing the communities that those software are supposed to serve. So without that foundation being ethics and community awareness, the focus of efficiency instead of that, I feel like is really detrimental with the interaction of these softwares with communities.
Thank you.
Yeah, and for me, I grew up in a household of technologists as well, and so I was really gravitating towards the tech space from a young age, and so I was exposed to a lot of the racial and gender disparities that exist in the tech world. And because of this, I knew I immediately had to take action, and as I was trying to create more awareness about this emerging challenge, I found that not a lot of people understand how this works. So one of the biggest challenges that we face is public awareness, and so when you try to read up and learn about this, you hear words like deepfakes, machine learning, neural networks just thrown out. And so one of the biggest things that we try to do is really break down the terms and how do we make this technology accessible and really understand what it works and how it works and the biases that it can have.
Yeah, so I think my initial introduction to AI and how exactly AI was used. I live in Atlanta, so Atlanta is one of the biggest, or actually the biggest city in America for income inequality, and so early on, I was exposed to racial disparities and kind of how that shaped the way that people interact with each other, and especially how this data was being taken and collected by companies. So like sensitive variables like race and gender were being exploited by these companies. And so specifically in Atlanta, like the situation that brought me to advocating for ethical AI was with Google's use of a consulting company to actually come into Atlanta, and this consulting company would actually pose a facial recognition scan as a game, and they would, they would put Black and homeless populations in Atlanta, and they would, say you would get a $5 gift card if you didn't, or if you did, participate in this, and they would actually take the data from that facial recognition scan and use it to improve their own algorithms, which is, again, unconsented data, and they're drawing these data to improve these communities, but in turn, they're actually harming the communities they're meaning to help. So I think that was what really drew me into creating more of a transparent way to really initiate progress in these companies.
Yeah, and for me, I've always been really interested in the intersection of technology and politics and elections. So when I learned about the Cambridge Analytica data scandal and how AI was a vital tool for foreign interference in the 2016 election, I was, of course, very interested, but also disturbed. And so more recently, when I read the Facebook files, when I read the Wall Street Journal's Facebook files, that reinforced my passion for AI ethics. And so I think one of the biggest challenges that we're facing is how to make sure AI doesn't break down our democracy.
Wow, you've covered a lot of ground. Just to help people get a real flavor for the work that you're doing, could you dig in deeper to a few examples of how these issues shape societal inequalities that Encode Justice cares about?
Yeah, so the first major issue we're seeing has to do with facial recognition technology, and I'll let Sumant explain what that is.
Yeah, so facial recognition technology, or FRT, is basically using computer vision to identify or confirm someone's identity based on a photo or video of their face.
And obviously, this is a really pervasive system. A lot of phones are unlocked with facial recognition, but one of the issues we've been seeing is when it's adopted by law enforcement agencies. And I think there's this idea that technology, because it's based on like code, it's infallible and it can't be incorrect, but really a study done by the NIST found that these systems almost unilaterally, like 190 systems, were 10 to 100 times more likely to misidentify the faces of people of color. And above on the right, you can see 𝗘ＨIS Parks, who was arrested in New Jersey on a shoplifting charge after his face was matched to the face of some security footage. You can see those are clearly not the same people. Mr. Parks provided a very solid alibi. He was not in the same city at the time of the crime. He did not own a car, despite this being a crime that involved a car, and still the police that were holding him in custody believed that since he was matched by this algorithm, it must be correct, and there was no way that there could be this major computer error. And even though facial recognition is awful when it's inaccurate, it's also bad when it's accurate, because this type of pervasive surveillance is a major violation of our right to privacy and really our right just not to be surveilled all the time.
So, like Mr. Parks, I actually had my own discrimination based from facial recognition technology. And this came the summer after my freshman year, where I went to a summer camp. And my first day there, they matched my face on my ID, or my name, to someone who wasn't me. So the picture on my ID was not me, but another dark-skinned girl. And when I talked to the organizer about it, who used facial recognition to kind of match the faces to some materials we had submitted earlier, they were insistent that that actually was me. And maybe I was wrong, and maybe that person kind of looked like me, so it was, when in actuality it wasn't. And when I finally convinced them that it wasn't, they downplayed it, saying it was a common computer error, it could happen to anyone. But that falter had me excluded from some of the events of the summer camps for the first couple of days until they could get that ID situation sorted out. And because of the way they kind of treated that situation, I too downplayed it, and I thought, oh yeah, like this could definitely happen to anybody. It's something that I can't really control and it's out of my control. However, like it really wasn't, and we need to acknowledge the fact that these computer systems can be incorrect, and when they are, they need to be held accountable.
Another sort of aspect of this is technosolutionism, where people instinctively think that technology is a solution to all of our problems. And this is especially apparent in the field of healthcare. One study found that for certain care recommendation program for people with complex health needs, a black person and a white person with a similar background, if you compared them, the black person actually needed to be more sick in order to be recommended to the same program. And this is because the data that was used relied on medical expense data, which just further exacerbated and exhibited the current biases that we have in our systems today.
Wow, thank you. So one of the most inspiring elements of your mission, as I was learning more about your organization, is that it's to grow a family of AI ethicists through your work on policy, advocacy, research, content creation, and education. Can you all tell us a bit about the work that you're moving forward and the values and priorities that are guiding Encode Justice?
Yeah, so the foundation of Encode Justice started off initially with this local grassroots organization. And so we really were able to tackle one, we started with California, and from there we were able to expand, knowing the importance of regionalized advocacy. So technology is incredibly expansive. It's in particularly urban and rural spaces, so there are different contexts to where technology is being used and how it's being used. So the primary focus of our chapter network and being in 40 plus states and 20 countries is to introduce that theme of context and how exactly can we implement advocacy that's fitting into these contexts and these spheres where the people are able to actually influence the policies that are being made. So a really great example of some legislation that we've done was when we actually helped do phone banking and email banking for this ordinance in King County, and they actually passed with a unanimous vote to ban the government use of facial recognition. And so that was something that we were, heavily involved in, and that those efforts paid off. And so in noticing, from what our chapter leads had said in the video, and these issues that were important to them, they're actually able to tackle these issues head on and, really be able to get the scope of their state and the issues in their state. So it's been really empowering for us to know that our work in the regionalized sector is so powerful that it's actually been, it's enabled us to take more ambitious, routes and tackle federal legislation and talk to federal lawmakers, which is very exciting. So here's a word from our global chapter coordinator, 𝗘άρχ𝗰ន់ici𝗱𝗲.
Whether I'm speaking to leaders from Encode Justice, our Egypt chapter. By the way, Adala means justice in Arabic. Or learning more about the New Zealand government's recent action on lethal autonomous weapons. The conversations we have are always insightful.
Awesome. So one focal point of our work is federal advocacy, because we recognize that the U.S. needs bold leadership and strict federal safeguards on privacy and civil rights protections. So last summer, our team actually traveled to Washington, D.C. to meet with lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, building a bipartisan consensus around these issues. And we were able to discuss our tech policy priorities and lobby. And we were actually able to bring these issues from facial recognition to deepfakes to the fore, because offices of these sorts rarely ever actually have these issues on their radar. So you can see pictures of us, scurrying through the hall of the Senate Hart Building, and all around Washington, D.C. That's us in Howard University, and us at a Biden rally. So that was pretty exciting for us to be a part of, and I think that it really encapsulates the community we built here at Encode Justice.
So another one of our major focuses is informing people, like just an ordinary person with no tech or activism background, about these issues that are really pervasive throughout our world that most people aren't aware of. And so what we did as an organization, a team of execs and fellows, we sort of compiled a research report of more extreme uses of artificial intelligence, usually in authoritarian states. And so one of the highlights of that was research we did about the Uyghur Muslims in China, who are currently the victim of a genocide. And what the Chinese government is doing is using these wide networks of facial recognition to identify, track, and then in turn Uyghur Muslims as part of their efforts to cleanse China of that ethnic group. And we met with actually a whistleblower from China who talked to us about the importance as a developed first world country to set the precedent of how we're going to treat this expansive surveillance, so that developing nations, even those that are sort of authoritarian, follow that example and understand that this sort of surveillance isn't okay. And then here's a video from our Director of International Affairs, who's joining us from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania.
As a kid growing up overseas, I was exposed to corruption, political violence, and injustice at a young age. At 5, I lived with my mother and sister in Tajikistan, and then moved to Egypt in the aftermath of the Arab Spring. I then moved to Israel, Palestine for 4 years. So when I moved back to the US at the beginning of high school, I was taken aback by a couple of things. In the most rich, powerful country in the world, I would still witness many of the same injustices and inequalities I saw in parts of my communities overseas. I've been living in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania for a month now, learning Swahili and trying to expand the movement. Part of expanding our initiatives abroad further includes understanding each country and community at an individual level. That's why I asked some of my new friends and other people I met along the way questions relating to our mission at Encode Justice.
Unajua ubaguzi algorithmic?
You know baguzi? No. You know it? Not really.
And over in research, we're not just working on debiasing unethical AI systems. We're also trying to give these amazing growth opportunities to our own research fellows, whether that's writing and publishing scientific manuscripts or working directly with research institutions. For example, we're currently in contact with the Distributed AI Research Institute. And in general, our goal is to empower our policy advocacy, outreach, and education efforts with a technical perspective, and to make sure that we're really established as genuine leaders in the field of AI ethics.
Yeah, and in contrast to that sort of technical perspective, it's really a major goal of Encode Justice to be releasing digestible information to increase the tech literacy and understanding of AI of the ordinary person. So We launched a blog that publishes weekly articles that sort of talk about different issues within AI and its intersections. And then also we're really focused on education within the school system. So our education sector has done an amazing job of increasing sort of public awareness of these issues.
A huge part of our initiative at Encode Justice is really tasking and empowering the next generation of technologists with a better understanding of how to create socially responsible technology and what it means to be ethical in AI. And so our workshop program has been amazing. Over the past year, we've had over 5,000 students that we've reached all across the United States. And so a lot of our workshops are really trying to target students with different backgrounds. And so a lot of them don't have a lot of computer science or technology background. So we start with a lot of, basic relatable technology content. If TikTok and Instagram all have these embedded algorithms in them. And so we start by explaining how do we interact with AI on a regular basis. And then we try to break it down by more specific intersections of artificial intelligence, so talking about healthcare, policy, media, and democracy. And so we have a lot of different intersections that we go over with our workshop curriculum. And so we've had a really expansive reach, as you can see. And the workshop curriculum really tries to break down, okay, how do we really work to how does this discrimination even occur within the technology, and how does this bias even happen, and really facilitating these discussions amongst the next generation. Because we are the next group that's going to go out there and actually create the technology. So we want to make sure that they're mindful of how is my work impacting people and the implications of that on our society.
And when you talk about students who are taking your workshops, is it just high schoolers?
Yeah, so right now our content is really focused on high school students. Of course, we welcome anyone to join our workshops, but we are working to expand our reach for a larger audience. So we're launching an online course, so that would be accessible for really anyone all over the world of any age to get access to these contents and to the resources of how AI ethics works.
We're actually also launching a junior fellowship program to engage middle school students because, as Vidya said, our work has primarily focused on contacting and reaching high school students, but I think it's important to start these conversations early and actually prime younger students for discussions about AI ethics. And so we are trying to bring this information to middle school classrooms, partnering with 2 middle school classrooms in Georgia, Raksha's home state, to actually help them prepare for an end-of-year symposium where they can present research on an AI topic of their choice. So we do believe in empowering and equipping multiple generations of change makers to take part in this conversation.
That's incredible. I'm going to go off script and ask the question that I think everybody here is wondering, which is how do you balance all of this work and be in high school, applying to college? How do you do all of this?
I mean, this organization was kind of a product of the COVID pandemic in a lot of ways. So I think during that time when a lot of us were doing school virtually, it was really helpful because we were able to be on an online class and then 2 minutes later be in like a lobbying meeting. I think we did one with Speaker Pelosi's office like right after school ended for some of us. And I think now even in person, there's a lot of having to balance, and luckily we're an organization that conducts most of our operations like online, so we're still able to put in that same amount of effort.
Yeah, there's a lot of code switching between our student roles and our activist roles. So there are many times that I've had to, get an excused absence for an Encode Justice meeting, or I've been trying to join a call during lunch or during my break period or after school. We definitely do have to balance that, but I think it's important to recognize that, even though we obviously do lead these complex and busy student lives, our work at Encode Justice never stops, and, we love committing ourselves to that work, and I think that's why we, make the effort to center our lives around that work and to ensure that we're able to make time for, these important meetings and these important events. And I think that's, been a challenge to navigate, but also something we've been pretty successful with.
Yeah, I can definitely say it's been a struggle sometimes. At school, you try to take a call. Actually, recently for the Speaker Pelosi call, I was getting out of math, and there was really no room for me to take the call, so I was like running through the hallways trying to find a place to take the call. So definitely balancing student life and trying to work through this is a challenge, but we definitely are really passionate about this work, and so we try to make it work.
Yeah, right now my parents are in the audience stressing about my AP stats test next week that I'm not studying for because I'm here in Boston right now. So there definitely is a lot of code switching at play, and we have to, be in full gear at all times.
Thank you. Okay, I have just a few more questions, and then I will open it up to the Q&A. I would love to know if you think diversifying the tech sector will have an impact on AI, and if so, how?
Yeah, I think this will actually have a huge impact. And so there's actually this principle that we talk about in our workshops a lot, which is garbage in, garbage out. And so this is honestly how all artificial intelligence works. We like to say that the devil is in the data, where a lot of the data that we input is often referred to as garbage because it's so disproportionately, targeted towards one specific population. And especially when we talk about like facial recognition technology, a lot of the data sets are only trained on white males, whereas people of color and women are often not represented. And so what we see is that we enter in garbage data, and so this is reflected in the results and how our predictive models are also giving out garbage results. And so what we see is that the creators of the technology, if we don't have representation there, we don't see the representation in the results, which is how we're getting more of this garbage results. So we need more of a larger representation within the creators and diversifying the backgrounds of our technologists in order to create a more inclusive space in technology.
And within that same vein, a lot of the data that's going into these algorithms are already really heavily skewed. And I think one really good example of that is predictive policing. If you have these already really high arrest rates in these marginalized communities, and you're trying to figure out where you send police, well, wherever you send police is where there are going to be more arrests, and then those same numbers are going to spike. And it becomes this really vicious feedback cycle of over-policing. So one of the things that algorithms can actually help us with is undoing some of this bias and trying to combat this negative data we're putting into these algorithms.
Okay, thank you. How do you think the fact that your organization is comprised of students changes how your message and your work is received?
Yeah, so I think when we're reaching students, it's a lot easier because we are connecting with people of the same age. A lot of us have really similar experiences, so it's really easy to kind of connect and really teach them with them being really receptive about the information that we have to share. When it comes to adults, however, it's a little bit of a different story, and that's because we are a different generation from a lot of the people we're speaking to, and we have a culture in our society where it depends on the amount of education that you have or the amount of experience you have. So being in high school, it's really hard to get that seat at the table and actually have people listen to you when you're at that table. And the way we've kind of been able to mitigate this effect and really use adults to amplify our voices through adult organizations and partnerships through those organizations. Some of the most notable examples that we've had is ACLU Massachusetts, where we helped organize their Student Week of Action as part of the Press Pause on Facial Surveillance campaign. And this campaign was targeted at students in Massachusetts because facial recognition technology is used in schools. So really not only educating the students about the harms of this technology that they see every day when they go to school, but also empowering them to advocate for their civil rights. Another really valuable partnership we've had is with the Algorithmic Justice League. They have a really similar mission to ours, really fighting for algorithmic justice. And we were able to help them by giving feedback, giving that youth perspective on their algorithmic harms reporting tool. And this is an online resource that they have been building to get feedback from people who've actually experienced this discrimination through algorithms and use that information to inform their future solutions.
Yeah, we definitely have our fair share of skeptics, I would say. People think that you need to have a PhD in computer science or years spent in government under your belt to have a seat at the table, but we reject that notion entirely because our generation is the most interconnected yet. We have been living with technology since day one. We have unparalleled rates of AI literacy, and we see it on social media, we see it everywhere we go, and I think that perspective in and of itself entitles us to a place in this conversation. Yeah, we don't have high school diplomas yet either, but I think that just the fact that we bring this enthusiasm, this perspective to the conversation, I think it makes us uniquely qualified and it makes us equal stakeholders in this conversation. So I think the more exclusionary these conversations are, the less likely it is that the status quo will ever fundamentally change, which is why we need, more inclusive conversations, which is why we need more inclusive movements, and that's why, we're always harping on, the importance of multi-generational collaboration because, I think that youth need to be involved in this fight, and, if not, we have some key perspectives missing from the conversation.
Absolutely. Okay. Last question before I open it up to what is a very popular Slido. Can you each talk a bit about what your biggest hopes are for AI in the future?
Yeah, I can start. I think, first of all, it'd be really great to pass a moratorium on facial recognition. And then just beyond that, really changing the sort of perception we have surrounding algorithms and technology and surveillance. I think as a society, we've become way too comfortable with the fact that our phones are listening to us all the time, and they're tailoring these ads towards us and really understanding how we think in a way that's kind of creepy, to be totally honest. So as a society, if we can understand, like, we have a right not to be surveilled, and we should be fighting and understanding these algorithms that are so pervasive in our everyday lives.
Yeah, I know there's no escaping algorithms, right? Social media algorithms, and in general, as we grow up, technology is only advancing, and so there's really no escape for us to completely get rid of this technology, and we shouldn't. There's a lot of benefits that it has in society as well. But one of the biggest things that I, personally, that I would want to see is how can we use the same technology that is causing all these biases and implications, how can we use it to detect and deter the biases instead of propagating them? And so really seeing, okay, how can I use that same technology as a tool rather than a weapon as it's currently being used?
Yeah, people often accuse us of being, entirely opposed to innovation, being opposed to progress. They label us Luddites who want to go back to living like cavemen, but that couldn't be farther from the truth, because in reality, I think that AI can be a force for good, and it absolutely, has so much positive, potential. For example, we're seeing, even in the context of criminal justice, we were talking about the use of facial recognition technology, the use of algorithmic risk assessment tools, and we're seeing how, that's reinforcing racial bias. But at the same time, there are amazing research teams working on, building and amplifying liberatory uses of AI. For example, we've seen teams at the Stanford Computational Policy Lab developing automatic race redaction tools to actually process case files and remove information that can be used to infer the race of a defendant. And that's bringing us one step closer to truly fair decision-making in criminal justice. We're seeing teams at the MIT Media Lab actually developing tools that, instead of evaluating how likely a defendant is to, commit a crime, they're evaluating how likely judges are to violate the Constitution, which is like flipping the script on its head entirely. So I think that, my hope for the future of AI is that we don't just have algorithms that can work within existing systems, but algorithms that can challenge and reimagine existing systems and narratives. And so I think that, we definitely can flip the script, and we can have AI on our side in the fight to tip the scales of justice.
It's been really important for us to put ethics at the forefront, not as an afterthought of developing tech. And so one of our greatest things is research, and just as Sneha was saying, partnering with research institutions and really collaborating and engaging with this research to develop that into big tech and to develop that into these algorithms that are so expansive and everywhere that we see. So we really want to see a future where these really big tech companies are considering this as the initial priority of who is it helping, who is it oppressing, and so really putting ethics at that first forethought, and again, that comes with public awareness. And so as a generation, we want to educate everyone around us, and we have the potential, or we have the people that are going to be the next technology leaders, and they're going to be the people that are developing and innovating this technology. So it's been really important to us to not just talk about the big tech companies that are right now, but also engage our generation in this conversation so that when they grow up, when they innovate, and when they build these technologies, they're able to do so in the most mindful way possible.
And despite the popularity of AI algorithms that we've described, there's a huge lack of AI competency in Congress. For example, Congressmember Blumenthal asking, "Are you committed to ending Finsta?" And so, at least I think a hope for all of us is that we can bring our technical expertise, both through lobbying efforts and potentially in the future actually working with and for Congress members, and bringing this technical viewpoint to Capitol Hill.
And I think another thing is just developing a society that understands the pervasiveness of technology. So going back to my experience, saying something is a simple or a common computer error, developing people with that mindset is really scary, because there is no such thing as a common computer error. So developing a society of people who understand that, and understand what an algorithm really is, that word is thrown around, but understanding the implications of that, which empowers them really to advocate for their rights and understand how to do that. And with that advocacy, you see a shift in the perspectives of the leadership, as well as accountability and where technology as a whole is going to go in the future.
Yeah, we've been conditioned to make an app or build a machine learning model every time we spot a problem without regarding its actual root causes. And I think that that thoughtless innovation is actually holding us back. It's encaging us. And unless we actually start thinking critically about where technology can be used, unless we actually start soliciting community input and actually communicating with diverse stakeholders, we're not going to be able to see technology being applied in the appropriate context. And so I think it's really important for us to have a generation that knows the limits and the boundaries of technology use, because unless we have that conscious awareness, we're going to keep exacerbating the issue of techno-solutionism with Sumanth, which Sumanth touched upon earlier. And I think it's really important for us to recognize that technology can be a supplementary aid, it can be a resource and a tool, but it really can't be dominating our society. And I think we need to have a more rigid distinction there between human power and the jurisdiction of machines.
Thank you. I think I am managing time. That is the end of the formal panel, and I would love to open it up to questions from the audience. I think they can, I think it's slido.com, and the password is Encode Justice, but I actually already have some great questions, so I will, okay, so actually, one of the questions is around, you referenced the concept of deepfakes a few times. For those to whom this term might be unfamiliar, can you say a little more about what this is and why it's a concern?
Yeah, so deepfakes are essentially synthetically generated media that can sort of alter a given video. And so applications of that could be creating an entirely false video of perhaps a politician saying something that they never said. And so, as I mentioned earlier, there was foreign interference with our 2016 election, and a large part of that was deepfakes and social media. And so what we saw was a lot of misinformation being spread through the use of deepfakes.
Thank you. That was really clarifying. We have another question about how you organize your work and how you coordinate between your state, national, and global chapters. I think the audience is looking to learn from your effectiveness.
Yeah, so how our chapters kind of interconnect is we are called chapter coordination for a reason. So we actually hold meetings usually every week where our chapters get together, and these can be various states or international chapters as well, but we do try to fit into time zones, so we might space those meetings out. But usually we get to interact and kind of build these terms where we focus on certain things. So like right now we're focusing on a term where we're talking about policy, and we're creating one-pagers on the policy that's most pertinent to us and our communities. And so because of that, so in chapter coordination, we kind of guide them into what projects and what guidelines and resources they can use, and the issues that they want to tackle is kind of up to them. So state chapters kind of coordinate with, the international chapters on similar issues, and they get to, really bridge perspectives and see how other people across the world and across the country get to, really tackle these issues firsthand.
Thank you. Okay, so a couple questions that I'm going to consolidate here around regulation. I'm going to ask what you think are the most promising ways to hold technology more accountable for its impacts.
Yeah, so I think that we've seen a new era of tech whistleblowers. We saw, 𝗘Ｈİ𝗰ecie𝗶𝗰𝗲 actually facing repercussions at Google. We've also seen Margaret Mitchell and tons of other whistleblowers. Sumanth talked about how Frances Haugen leaving Facebook and releasing the Facebook files actually helped, catalyze his entrance into Encode Justice. So I think that it's really important for us to elevate tech worker organizing and to build solidarity among tech workers, because, we have to challenge these systems of oppression and power from the inside out. And so I think that it's really important to us to support on-the-ground organizing, and that's why, we are so ardent about, supporting tech workers, and we definitely want to build alliances to better uplift whistleblowers who are doing this work, not only those who, come from authoritarian countries, like what Alexander was touching upon earlier, but also those who are working within big tech companies and know firsthand the harms of these algorithms, because unless they, cast light on the inner workings of these companies, the public will never be aware. And so that's really important to us.
Yeah, and another thing is holding people accountable. So again, you can't take an algorithm to court. That's not possible. So we need to hold the CEOs and the people in power that are letting these, slips slide and letting these, biases exist in their algorithms, and, not really doing anything. And again, we've seen this with what Seana was talking about, whistleblowers and people noticing in this. And so when people of power do not do anything about this or aren't taking the most active stride to make sure this does not happen, it is really critical that in the future we're able to hold the people behind these executive decisions accountable, especially going forward.
Thing is, when we talk about accountability, it's not always a reactive approach, but also a proactive approach. And so something that we're exploring is an FDA-style commission, where it's more for technology. So when we think about drugs being released, or even the vaccine with the CDC, there was so much precautionary procedures that went there, and we saw so much time went into, okay, what kind of impacts is this going to have? And we've seen with deepfakes and facial recognition, technology is having just as much of an impact. And so having a commission that's able to watch over what kind of technology are we releasing, how are we being mindful, and thinking about this before we actually putting it out there is a huge part. And so having that kind of commission would really help.
Yeah, and like Sumant mentioned, there's not a lot of competence in Congress surrounding these issues, and that comes from sort of a larger issue of having these lifetime senators and representatives who really aren't in touch with their constituents anymore or the issues that are very topical and relevant. And also we have to understand that sometimes there aren't really nuances to these technologies. Sometimes they just don't have a place in our society. Like facial recognition, there aren't really any net positive uses of the technology, and that's why we're advocating for a full moratorium on its usage.
Thank you. So there are a couple questions here around big tech, and I think the audience is interested in if you've been approached by big tech or what efforts you see large tech companies taking to address these issues, if those are any partnerships that you plan to build or are thinking of.
Well, I'm seeing a lot of virtue signaling. I'm seeing a lot of companies that are trying to issue these very performative fair AI pledges, assembling these AI ethics teams, and they end up firing half of the team anyway, right? So I think that we definitely see concerns around that because we see big corporations trying to act as though they are genuinely paying attention to these issues, when in reality there is no meaningful action taking place. It's all symbolic and it's all talk. And so we definitely do think that corporations and companies can be allies in this fight, especially because technology developers have a role to play. We've been talking about that with Vidya and Dami throughout the conversation. This needs to take place within the industry as well. I definitely think that they can be allies in this fight, but at the moment we're seeing a lot of symbolic action and we're seeing a lot of virtue signaling, and I think that we need to have some more meaningful conversations. And I think that that's why it is promising to us to see companies pledging to drop their use of facial recognition technology, pledging to end their partnerships with law enforcement. That definitely is a step in the right direction, but at the same time we definitely do want to see an entire shift within the industry in terms of how we view technology. And I think that really does start with abandoning techno-chauvinism and abandoning techno-solutionism.
And to add, we definitely think that tech workers speaking for their beliefs, whether they're at big tech companies or not, is especially important. Yeah. For example, Google once had a Project Maven, which was a collaboration with the Department of Defense, I believe, regarding autonomous systems and national security and warfare. And tech workers at Google stepped up and said that they didn't want to contribute to this technology because they didn't feel that it was ethical. So we definitely think that's really important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think I actually have no idea how I'm doing on time. I assume someone will interrupt, but there's a great question here around marginalized communities and access to technology. So I really want to ask it. Access to technology can often be barred for youth from marginalized communities. How could you expand your content to those youth that do not have easy access to technology?
Awesome, yeah. So I think Raksha can talk about the work that we're doing to build broadband access through our chapter coordination efforts.
Yeah. So definitely. So right now we talk about, cultural context, which is really important, especially regarding digital rights, just given where we are, in the world right now. So especially in international affairs, when we talk about Tanzania, there's this issue first with establishing this access to internet. So everyone is not they don't have great digital literacy there because not everyone has access to internet. So expanding that access to internet would kind of be that first beacon of helping these people understand how the internet works and kind of the dangers and but the benefits that these things can propose. And also we've seen in Tanzania censorship of their election. And so because people don't have access to the internet and they're not able to access this information, I think it first starts with raising that community awareness and building projects that are really able to reach, information to these people about, how are they being censored, how is their free speech being monitored, which is, again, super important just to start at that base level.
And that's why it's really important to us to have a very expansive chapter network, because if you have groups like in the grassroots of these different communities, they can really be spreading the message even if we can't reach everyone digitally.
Thank you. There is, yeah, no one's stopping me, so we'll keep going. Do you believe the public cares enough about the privacy issues you raised? Are you concerned our society cares so much about convenience that we will willingly sacrifice our privacy?
Well, I mean, I work with a lot of students, and so I definitely think there's a lack of awareness to begin with, so we don't often acknowledge it as a problem. And so when you were talking about, even if we do acknowledge, do I continue to post on TikTok even though I know? I think that's sort of like a question that a lot of students are faced with, and that's part of our discussion at Encode Justice, and that students are constantly being asked, how can I, I'm in this world where I'm constantly being profiled by technology, but how do I work through that? And I think a lot of students, especially young students, are working through like managing privacy versus how can I protect people, right? And so I don't think there's a definitive answer for that, because I think a lot of people are still managing their own lives, and I think it's definitely like helpful with accessibility where we're able to ease our lives with artificial intelligence, but I think it's definitely going to be a prevalent part, so creating that socially responsible aspect is the best way to go about that.
I think people don't even grasp the enormity of the issue yet. I mean, last week we saw Clearview AI actually pledging to make every single person on planet Earth identifiable with their facial recognition technology, and they said they would need 100 billion photos to do that. And so people don't recognize those photos are being scraped from your social media feeds. Every single time you post, you're creating a digital footprint, and that's potentially being fed to these facial recognition algorithms. The vast majority of US adults are already in a law enforcement facial recognition database. I think that we're missing public awareness, and if we don't have public awareness, people can actually grasp the magnitude of these civil rights and privacy violations. And so that's why it's so important to us to build that awareness, and that's why it's so important for us to acknowledge the fact that these issues are a lot more pervasive than we think. And, like Vidya said, every single time we log on to a social media app, we are being transformed into a data point. We are being treated as a statistic. We are being constantly profiled. Our preferences are being profiled. Our interests are being profiled. Who we are, where we're from, all of that is being sort of quantified. And I think that we don't realize how reductive that is. We don't realize the fact that, that's really capturing all of this information about us beyond our awareness or perception.
Has doing this work changed how you're using and interacting with technology? I mean, tell me so I can modify my behavior tomorrow.
Yeah, I definitely think it makes us, more conscious of the way we look at algorithms and all technology. Like we were just mentioning, AI is so common in social media, especially with companies trying to scrape our data for facial recognition technology. And so even when we see information on social media, like political information perhaps, we definitely do now actively consider the other viewpoints and try to get all possible viewpoints considered, because we know that social media's algorithms are perpetuating this filter bubble, because all institutions have this sort of echo chamber where all our ideas are kind of in line with our colleagues. And so social media just makes that worse, and we're more aware of it now.
Yeah, and for me, growing up, I always put a lot of trust into big tech companies. Companies like Amazon and Google, I always thought they were like innovation and represented innovation, and they do, but I wasn't always aware of how they can have such a huge detrimental impact on our society. So definitely joining Encode Justice, having these types of discussions definitely gave me this perspective of, I have to be questioning what they're doing. You can't just simply believe that all types of technology that they're putting out there is 100% accurate, and having those kinds of challenging conversations is a huge part of what's changed for my mindset.
Yeah, and I think kind of as putting the more developing perspective, so when we're actually developing those software, 90% of the developers on the App Store are actually small-time individual developers. So there is a culture with these big tech companies to push, these machine learning models are really, really easy to use or really, really easy to embed in your systems. However, I feel like the work that we're doing here, I, as an app developer myself, am more conscious about how we're actually what models we're using. Just because it's easy doesn't necessarily mean that the data is representative or that it's completely accurate or that it's ethical. So having this perspective, as well as balancing that out with what these big tech companies are pushing towards developers, is really good in that decision making when you're trying to create these solutions to problems that you see.
Thank you. I cannot tell you how incredible it has been to spend time with you and to learn from you and be inspired by what you guys are doing. I have been informed that I have gone over time, and I would like to pass it back to James, our host.
Let's have a hand for the incredible leaders of Encode Justice. They make me feel very unproductive in talking to them. And Seana, thank you so much for leading this incredible conversation. Thank you all for being here tonight and sharing. You're even going to get your first Boston snowstorm tomorrow,
Wow.
which is really exciting.
What a gift.
We can't wait to see what you continue to do in the future. Thank you again to the Lowell Institute for supporting the adult programming here at the Museum of Science and making tonight possible. And thank you to all of you who have joined us on site and are watching from afar. We hope you will continue to do so all season long. But until then, stay safe, stay well. Have a wonderful night, everyone.
You guys were amazing.